think. Yep, there we go. So if you could pause for a moment, I'm going to try and make this one about 20 minutes. So this is kind of the part 2 to the stairs, right? So we're kind of switching up gears here. It's not really about modeling, but it's definitely a useful tool. And you may have heard of it before. It's called Grasshopper, right? So I went ahead and actually put some files on our Google Drive link. So if you take a look, open it up, you'll find Grasshopper and the actual file that we need, right? And it's entitled Military Projection. It's not one that I made. It's actually, somebody made it in like 2009. So I mean, we're a little behind. But of course, the website link is there as well, just in case you need to actually sort of read the form. It's a pretty good site, you know. So Grasshopper, I think it's actually an extension of Food for Rhino too. So what's really nice is, man, if you ever have a problem with Grasshopper or Rhino and you can't necessarily find that question precisely on Google, this is a great resource to go to. Grasshopper 3D or Rhino 3D forms are definitely the way to go. But let's talk about it really briefly. I'm going to turn this off real quick and show you how to load it all by yourself. So this is more in the scenario that, of course, we're done. We're trying to get this thing into Illustrator and things like that. So specifically, the assignment asked for a 45-45 Axon, right? And unfortunately, there's not really a command yet for Rhino that just sort of click and turns it into an Axon because, well, there's a lot of different projections and there's a lot of different variables that we can actually use to make that projection. So let's say that I was absolutely done with my stairs. However, right now I kind of have an isometric, right? You know, it's 60, 30, and then of course, basically a perspective. So what we know about a plan oblique is that, well, it's actually true scale, right? At least in terms of a two-dimensional image. It usually meets at a 45 degree angle. You probably remember it from graphics too, right? However, you know, this is going to blow your mind a little bit. You can make the entire model and of course even produce those kinds of drawings. So let's say I was absolutely finished with this drawing. I would type in Grasshopper. And of course, let's actually close mine. So basically you'll have a load screen and this general window will come up. Now it has its own sort of things to go by, right? I think in Windows, like File, Edit, View, Display is actually up here. However, on the Mac, it turns, as you guys know, we get our toolbar, you know, it basically changes, right? So once you click on that Grasshopper, you'd go to File, Open, right? Open that document. In my case, it's Military Projection 1. And we get this script file. So this is kind of an introduction to Grasshopper. We're not going to cover a whole lot of Grasshopper unless it's little small things like this that, of course, are very beneficial. And very often, the way that I learned Grasshopper was, of course, looking at other people's files, right? It was definitely one of those things that was absolutely foreign to us. And it definitely puts us into the vocabulary of these digital programs. For instance, how many of you guys know what a mesh is versus a brep versus a geo, which is, of course, short for geometry. So there's all actually types of geometries that we're actually even making in Rhino. For instance, what we've been working in with right now is actually all breps, right? However, if you were to 3D print something, you would transfer it to a mesh file. Now, again, I'm not trying to confuse us today, or really, you know, confuse us for this project. But since stairs are relatively easy and simple, this is a good opportunity to use it. So in my case, I'm going to clear, because mine is actually kind of already set up. So I'm going to clear my values. So you should see yours kind of as an orange message going, hey, I need geometry to actually use. And I think by default it said like the mesh was enacted. So what's kind of nice about this is all of these are commands, but they can be used in tandem, right? So for instance, a mesh is a command, input's a command, flip is a command, rotate is a command, and of course these say old, but you know, you shouldn't have a problem. But a lot of people think that, well, is there a lot of math involved? Well, yeah, but I mean, I think everybody knows what pi is, right? An irrational number, sort of infinitely going. I think people understand what x and y is. So it's kind of an opportunity to to learn a little bit more about the math behind everything that you're doing. Now, I'm definitely more on the skeptical side that you don't really need to be an absolute engineer to be a great architect. But engineering is definitely involved, and I would definitely call this more of an engineering and coding and scripting, right? So you can definitely check that box on your resume. Hey, have you ever looked into scripting or anything of that sort? And coding? Yeah, I actually have a little bit of experience. So basically we need an input and we get an output. So this is where it gets fun. We'll take, and this is where it's great to have two screens. We'll take our input model. So in our case, we'll highlight the entire thing. And of course, it's a BREP. Not that you really need to know what that is yet. But we'll right-click on BREP, and we'll set multiple BREPs. Right? We don't want to just set one of those objects. We want all of those objects, so I'll set all of them. It'll turn gray for us, meaning there's no longer an error. And I'll connect it to my input script. You'll notice it also starts to gray up and enacts everything. So the way that this works is, we have a lot of stuff up here that we don't really need to use, at least for this script, but here's a preview, here's a wireframe, and then here's basically the object. And if you float around on it, it'll actually tell you what it is. So in our case, it's draw shaded preview of that geometry. So I just put it in there, nothing happened, or at least so it seems. If I go to the top view though, I suddenly have this red model that has been scripted out for me, right? What's really nice is if you take a look at it in 3 dimensions, it's honestly a pretty wild and chaotic model, right? You guys see that? It's like, what did it do to my stairs? Well, funny enough, Grasshopper is displaying a preview for us. In fact, if I try to highlight it, nothing will happen because, well, it's not actually there. This is actually just a preview generated by Grasshopper. So what we'll do, and what's really nice about at least this script, don't change any of the numbers because that's kind of set in stone. A -1/4 of a pi. I don't even want to get into the math of that. But if you click on output, you'll start to see that it turns green. So again, this is probably the best way for me to kind of display this. I apologize. But let's take a look, right? Because what's nice about this is I can do things in real time. So here's that object that I input. If I rotate it, it's going to rotate the model for me, right? And of course, it's only going to look correct in the top view, right? How cool is that, right? I mean, this is like milestones of work that would have to be done to make multiple different views of this model. I guess I'm kind of geeking out because when I was in school, I'd literally have to draw this by hand or by hand in the computer, right? So a very useful tool, right, to say the least. But I can dial it in and get exactly what I want in terms of a 45 degree angle. And of course, it's going to do all that skewing and rotation for me. But once I, maybe lock something in place, I can do this. So I'll right click on that output. I'll type in bake. I really don't know why it's called baked, but I guess this refers to formulas. When you bake a formula, that's usually how they refer to as running some sort of script. But we'll hit bake. We'll set a layer, so I can even set the layer to say, make 2D drawings. I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll turn off my preview, and nothing will happen. Let's try that again. Maybe I do still need to figure out some bugs. It's because I have no preview. Fail. Enabled. Well, it's definitely ready to output something. So this is actually a geometry. Let's try a blurb. Or a brep. There we go. So yeah, now it's more like a physical item. Let's turn that one off. There we go. So of course, if we input a brep, we probably want to output a brep. So let's test that out. I might have to figure this one out a little bit. However, at least it's a nice introduction to the issue itself. However, I might actually just scratch this out of the recording and see if I can figure it out myself. However, it's definitely enough to get started, right? With the script itself, open up Grasshopper, and obviously this is the steps after you finish the stairs, right? So let's do some investigation. Let's try a NURB. Oh. So like I said, there's all kinds of different geometries. It's not really a mesh. And a blurb is showing up. I wonder if I have my layers off. That might do it too. Oh, would you look at that? My layers are off. That's why. So it wasn't a problem with the program. I just had my layers off. So good. I made a mistake. That way, just in case you run into the same thing, of course, you know how to fix it. But there's that baked object that we were talking about, right? And it puts it in a wireframe mode for us, right? So, you know, be cognizant of that. We can also take a look at it in shaded. There we go. Perfect. So, of course, we bake that output. In our case, I had to switch it to a brep. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that original geo was actually working, but at least now you have two different ways to control that script. So, once we were done with that, we do have that model, but last but not least, we have to make 2D. Of course, it's going to take a little while. That's pretty complex. But now we have that exact view for us, right? Let's try another thing, because what's nice about Grasshopper is, well, I can do actually quite a few things. I can multiply iterate something. So, not sure where my Grasshopper went. Let's type it again. Usually it pops right back up, but maybe I closed it. Maybe I accidentally put it off far too much. There it is. So what's nice about this is I can reiterate that that preview, right? So again, I could rotate this again and try maybe a couple of different views actually for myself. Maybe I want to try out that view. Again, just output, bake, and I'll set it to a layer that's not, that is visible, right, of course. Go ahead and bake it. Great, we got another view. Right, so I'll take that one. Maybe not the best view though. I don't know about you guys, which one's better? Probably the first one, right? However, now you can of course rotate it and view it for yourself, right, to say the very least. But yeah, this has kind of been just, you know, really a short tutorial of how we would develop that axonometric view. It's definitely something you can use in Studio, just because, you know, Ez was already telling us, you know, Chronodal was kind of using the old way. You can basically type in a script too, but that's usually really complex, especially for first-time students using these programs. So, you know, I think it's actually a very nice introduction to at least Grasshopper, right? So just to recap, right, we'll switch it from brep, and what's really nice is, of course, we can just drag these things, right? And you can play around with it a little bit, right? If you hold Alt, you can actually delete a connection, right? Or tap it back in, right? So again, this is a really useful way to run multiple programs or multiple commands at a single instance, right? So obviously a lot of potential there. But yeah, any questions about that, guys? Sweet, we'll leave it at there.